Marry me for 90 days, and then walk away like none of this ever mattered. The words echo in Chloe Bennett's head as the glittering lights of a Manhattan gala blur into something unreal. The kind of night she never should have belonged to. The kind of world that smells like expensive perfume and polished marble, not rain-soaked sidewalks and overdue rent notices. Just 12 hours earlier, she was standing outside her tiny walk-up apartment clutching a crumpled eviction notice. Her landlord's voice still ringing in her ears, her bank account hovering under $50. Her future shrinking by the minute, until a Blacktown car pulled up beside her and a stranger in a tailored charcoal suit stepped out like he owned not just the street, but the air around it. Ethan Carter, a name she didn't recognize yet, a man who studied her like she was an equation he could solve. And somehow in less than 5 minutes he offered her a deal that sounded insane, even as desperation made it feel like oxygen. A fake engagement, appearances only, a contract signed in clean black ink. A ring slipped onto her finger that felt too heavy, too perfect, too wrong, like it belonged to someone else's life. Now, standing beneath crystal chandeliers that cast fractured light across a sea of powerful strangers, Chloe can feel every eye on her, every whisper curling through the room. Because tonight is the night they go public, the final test, the final performance, the moment she was paid to survive. And yet nothing feels like acting anymore. Not the way Ethan's hand rests at the small of her back, steady and real. Not the way his voice drops when he leans in close and murmurs, "Just trust me." Not the way her heart betrays her with every glance, every silence, every almost confession that never quite makes it to the surface. She remembers the rules, the contract, the clear line drawn between them. No feelings, no complications, no future. But somewhere between late-night strategy sessions and quiet elevator rides that stretched a second too long, something shifted, something dangerous, something neither of them said out loud. And now as the music softens and the spotlight sharpens, Ethan steps forward, takes her hand, and suddenly the entire room fades, because there's something different in his eyes tonight, something that doesn't belong in a contract. Something that makes her pulse stutter as he reaches into his pocket. And Chloe realizes with a jolt of fear, she can't explain that whatever happens next was never part of the deal. And when he lowers himself onto one knee, the world tilts, the ring in his hand catching the light in a way that feels nothing like the one she's wearing. And her breath catches as a single thought crashes through her mind, louder than the applause starting to rise around them, louder than her own heartbeat, louder than everything she thought she understood. This was supposed to be fake. So why does it feel like she's about to lose something real? "Do not do this," Chloe whispers, her voice barely steady as Ethan remains on one knee in front of hundreds of watching eyes, the silence stretching so thin it almost snaps. And for a second, he does not move, does not speak, just looks at her like he has been waiting for this exact moment his entire life. Not the contract version, not the stage smiles, but this raw, uncertain version where she could walk away and take everything with her. And Chloe feels it, that terrifying shift, because this is no longer a performance. This is something else, something she cannot control. The applause falters into confused murmurs as she takes a step back, her fingers trembling around the edge of the ring he had given her weeks ago, the one that never quite fit right, the one she kept twisting whenever she felt like she was pretending to be someone she was not. And suddenly it feels heavier than ever, like it is exposing her. Like everyone can see right through her borrowed dress, her borrowed life, her borrowed place beside a man who was never supposed to matter. She remembers the night she signed the contract, the sterile office, the clean lines, the way Ethan had listed every rule like a man building walls, no emotions, no expectations, no future, and she had agreed because she needed the money, because survival does not leave room for pride, because she told herself it was just another temporary fix, another role to play until she could stand on her own again. But no one had warned her about the quiet moments, the ones that were never written into the agreement, like the night the power went out in his penthouse and they stood by the window watching the city go dark, or the morning he made coffee himself instead of calling staff and handed her a cup like it meant something, or the way he listened when she talked about her designs like they were worth hearing. "Chloe," he says now, finally breaking the tension, his voice low but clear enough to carry across the room. And there is no script in it, no calculated tone. just something real that makes her chest tighten. This was never supposed to happen like this. And she almost laughs at the irony because that is the only true thing left between them. Nothing about this is going according to plan, not the way her heart is racing, not the way his eyes are searching hers like he is asking a question he cannot take back. And then the whispers grow louder as a familiar voice cuts through the crowd, sharp and precise. His former fiancée stepping forward with a knowing smile that feels like a blade wrapped in silk. "You should tell them, Ethan," she says lightly, glancing at Chloe with thinly veiled disdain. "Tell them how much she is being paid to stand there." And just like that, the illusion cracks, the room shifting from admiration to judgment in seconds, eyes narrowing, expressions changing, the story rewriting itself in real time. And Chloe feels it hit her like cold air. The truth she tried to outrun finally catching up, because no matter what she felt, no matter what he might say next, this is how the world sees her, a temporary girl, a rented promise, a mistake dressed in silk, and her throat tightens as she slowly reaches for the ring on her finger, the one that never belonged to her, the one that was never meant to stay. The ring slides off her finger slower than she expects, as if even gravity hesitates to take it from her. And for a moment Chloe just stands there holding it in her palm, feeling every eye in the room press against her like judgment she cannot escape. The whispers no longer subtle, no longer polite, because now they have a story they understand. Now they can label her, define her, dismiss her, and it is easier that way. Easier than wondering if something real ever existed between her. And the man still kneeling in front of her. Ethan does not move, does not look at anyone else. His gaze locked on her like nothing else matters, like the entire room has disappeared, but Chloe cannot ignore it, cannot unhear the words that exposed everything she tried to pretend was not true. And the worst part is not that it is a lie, but that it is not, because she did agree, she did sign, she did take the money. And no matter how much her heart changed after, the beginning of their story is still built on something temporary. Say something. The ex-fiancé adds softly, almost amused now, watching the tension unfold like entertainment. Tell them how convincing she was. And Chloe feels something inside her tighten, not anger exactly, not even humiliation, but a quiet clarity that settles in her chest. Because this is the moment where she has to choose what kind of person she is going to be. Not the girl who needed saving, not the girl who accepted a deal, but the one who decides. How this ends. She lifts her chin slightly, her voice steady even if her hands are not. "She is right," she says, and the room shifts again, attention sharpening. "I agreed to this. I needed the money. I needed a way out, and he offered it." A ripple moves through the crowd, some satisfied, some disappointed, some simply curious, but Chloe does not look at them. She only looks at Ethan, because he deserves the truth more than anyone else in this room. "But that is not why I stayed." Her voice softens just enough to betray what she cannot fully say. "And that is not why this is hard." For a second something flickers across his face. Something fragile, something real, and it almost breaks her. Resolve almost makes her step forward instead of away. Almost makes her believe that maybe this could have been different, but then she remembers the contract, the rules, the reality that their worlds were never meant to align, and slowly, deliberately, she places the ring back into his hand, her fingers brushing his for the briefest moment, warm against warm, real against real, and that is what makes it unbearable. "This was the deal," she whispers, "just for him," the words nearly lost under the growing noise around them. "And I think we both know it is over." Ethan's hand closes around the ring, but he still does not stand, still does not look away, as if standing would make it final, as if letting her go would erase something he has not yet said, and Chloe can feel it, that unfinished sentence hanging between them, that truth he has not revealed, and for a heartbeat she hesitates, wondering if she should stay, if she should wait, if she should give him the chance to say whatever is breaking behind his silence. But fear moves faster than hope, and she takes another step back, then another, until the distance between them feels impossible to cross, until the room swallows her whole, until the only thing louder than the whispers is the sound of her own heart asking a question she is too afraid to answer. What if walking away is the one mistake she cannot fix? The ballroom doors close behind Chloe with a soft, final click that somehow feels louder than the applause she just left behind. And the cold night air hits her skin like a reality she cannot delay any longer. Manhattan stretching out in front of her in endless lights that suddenly feel distant instead of magical. And for the first time all night she exhales. But it does not feel like relief. It feels like something breaking quietly inside her. Her heels echo against the stone steps as she descends too quickly, her breath uneven, her mind replaying every second. The look in Ethan's eyes, the way he said her name, the way he did not stop her, and that is what stings the most. Not the whispers, not the humiliation, but the silence, because if it mattered, he would have said something. Right. He would have stood up, crossed the distance, fought for it, but he did not. And that thought wraps around her chest until it feels hard to breathe. She reaches the sidewalk just as a taxi slows at the curb, the driver glancing at her through the glass, ready to take her anywhere but here, anywhere but back. And for a second her hand hovers over the door handle. Because leaving means it is real. Leaving means there is no going back to the quiet moments, the almost truths, the version of him she thought she saw, and yet staying would mean facing a world that already decided who she is. Behind her, inside that glowing building, conversations are already shifting, stories rewriting themselves, and she knows exactly how it will sound by morning. The girl who was paid to pretend, the CEO who made a spectacle, the engagement that was never real, and Chloe swallows hard, forcing herself to move forward, because that is what she has always done: survive, adapt, keep going even when it hurts. The taxi door opens with a soft creak, and just as she is about to step in, a voice cuts through the night, sharp, urgent, and unmistakably his. Chloe, wait. And everything inside her freezes, because she did not expect that. She told herself not to expect that, and slowly, almost against her will, she turns, the city noise fading into something distant as she sees him standing at the top of the steps. No jacket, no composure. Just Ethan Carter stripped of everything that usually makes him untouchable, his breath visible in the cool air, his expression no longer controlled but real in a way that makes her heart stumble. He walks toward her, not rushing, not hesitating, each step deliberate, as if he knows this is the only chance he has left, and when he stops a few feet away, the distance between them feels heavier than the entire ballroom she just escaped, because now there are no witnesses, no audience. Just truth waiting to be spoken. Chloe crosses her arms slightly, not to defend herself, but to hold herself together. Her voice quieter now, steadier than she feels. You do not have to do this, she says, because part of her still wants to protect him from the mess they created, still wants to make it easier, cleaner, something they can both walk away from without looking back. But Ethan shakes his head almost immediately, a small, decisive movement that carries more weight than anything he said all night. Yes, I do, he replies. And there is something in his tone that makes her pulse quicken, something final, something that does not sound like a man following a contract, but like someone about to break one. And Chloe feels it again, that dangerous shift, that pull she tried to ignore, because whatever he is about to say now will not be part of the deal, and for the first time since she walked away. She realizes she might not be ready to hear it. Then say it, Chloe says before she can stop herself, the words slipping out sharper than she intended. Because if he is going to break whatever this was, she needs him to do it completely, not halfway, not with silence, not with looks that leave too much unsaid. Ethan exhales slowly, like he has been holding this in for far longer than tonight, his gaze never leaving hers even as the city hums quietly around them. Distant traffic, a passing siren, the soft rush of wind between buildings that makes the moment feel suspended outside of time. You think I did not say anything in there, he begins, his voice low but steady. Because I did not care. And Chloe does not answer, because that is exactly what she thought. What she convinced herself was true the second she walked away, but something in his tone makes it harder to hold on to that belief. I did not stop you. He continues, taking a step closer, closing just enough of the distance to make her breath catch, because if I had, it would have looked like I was defending a lie, like I was protecting the story they just built about you, and you deserve more than that. The words land differently than she expects, not as an excuse, but as something heavier, something intentional, And for a moment she just looks at him, trying to understand the man standing in front of her now compared to the one who handed her a contract weeks ago. Then what was that? She asks quietly, her voice losing some of its edge. What was tonight supposed to be? Because she needs to hear it from him. Needs to know if everything she felt was just something she imagined or something he chose. Ethan runs a hand through his hair, a rare break in his composure. And when he speaks again, there is no distance left in his tone, no calculated control, just truth. It was supposed to be the end of the contract, he says, and her chest tightens instantly. The words confirming what she already knew, what she already accepted, and yet he does not. Stop there. And the beginning of something real. And that is the part she did not expect, the part that makes her heart stumble. In a way that feels both hopeful and terrifying at the same time. Chloe shakes her head slightly, almost instinctively, because it is easier to doubt than to believe something that could change everything. You do not just decide that, she says, her voice softer now, but still guarded. You do not just turn something fake into something real because it is convenient. And for a second she sees something flash in his eyes, not anger, not frustration, but something deeper, something that looks almost like regret. It was not convenient, he replies, his voice firm now, certain in a way she has never heard before. It was the only way I knew how to keep you close long enough to realize I did not want to let you go. And the honesty in that statement hits her harder than anything else he has said, because it strips away the distance, the roles, the structure that kept them safe, leaving only something vulnerable and real standing between them. Chloe swallows, her thoughts racing, every memory replaying with a new meaning, every moment shifting under the weight of what he is saying now. And for the first time since she walked out of that ballroom, she feels the ground beneath her change, not solid, not certain, but no longer as clear as she believed. And as she looks at him standing there, no contract, no audience, no script, just a man asking her to see him differently. She realizes the question she thought was already answered is suddenly wide open again, and she does not know if that makes this easier or infinitely harder. Chloe lets out a slow breath, but it trembles halfway through, because everything he is saying is unraveling the version of reality she forced herself to accept just minutes ago. And the more he speaks, the harder it becomes to hold on to the idea that this was simple, temporary, controlled. She wraps her arms tighter around herself, not out of cold, but to steady the storm building inside her. You should have told me, she says quietly, her eyes searching his as if trying to find where the truth began and where the act ended. You should have told me when it changed for you. And there is no accusation in her tone, only something more fragile, something closer to disappointment, because what hurts is not just the situation, but the fact that she was never given the chance to choose it with him. Ethan nods once, slowly, like he already knows that, like he has replayed that mistake more times than he can count. I was going to, he admits, his voice softer now, less guarded. Tonight was supposed to be that moment. And Chloe almost laughs, not because it is funny, but because of how perfectly everything went wrong. Because the one moment meant to make things real is the same moment that broke everything apart. She glances back briefly at the glowing building behind them, the place where this all collapsed, and then back at him. You planned all of that, she says, not as a question, but as a realization. The ring, the proposal, the timing, the audience. You were going to tell me in front of everyone. And he hesitates just long enough for her to understand the answer before he even says it. I thought it would show you I was serious, he replies, and that is when something shifts in her expression, not anger, not rejection, but clarity, because she finally sees the difference between what he intended and what she needed. Ethan, she says, her voice steadier now, more grounded. That is not how this works. And he frowns slightly, not defensive but confused, as if he genuinely does not understand what he did wrong. And that realization softens something in her, because he is not trying to hurt her. He just does not know how to do this any other way. You cannot build something real on top of something I never agreed to. She continues, each word measured, careful. You made a decision for both of us without asking me if I wanted that. And the silence that follows is heavier than anything before, because this is not about contracts or money anymore. It is about trust, about choice, about the one thing that was missing from the very beginning. Ethan looks down for a brief second, the first time he breaks eye contact, and when he looks back up, there is something different there, something that looks like understanding, or maybe acceptance. "You are right," he says, and the simplicity of that answer surprises her, because she expected resistance, explanation, something to push back against what she just said, but instead he just stands there, taking it in, letting it settle between them. Chloe exhales again, slower this time, because this is what she needed, not a perfect moment, not a public gesture, but honesty, even if it comes late, even if it comes after everything has already fallen apart. And for a second they just stand there, the city moving around them, the night stretching forward, uncertain but open, and she realizes that whatever happens next is no longer part of a deal, no longer something written down and signed, but something that has to be chosen, step by step, without guarantees, without safety. And that might be the most frightening part of all, because for the first time since this began, the outcome is not controlled by circumstance, but by them. The silence between them stretches, not empty, but heavy with everything that has not been decided yet. And Chloe feels it settling into her chest like a question she cannot ignore anymore. Because walking away was simple when she believed the story was finished, but now it is not. Now it is open, uncertain, and somehow more real than anything that came before. She looks at Ethan again, really looks this time, not at the CEO, not at the man who offered her a contract, but at the person standing in front of her now, stripped of certainty, waiting without control, and it unsettles her in a way she cannot easily explain. "So what happens now?" she asks finally, her voice quieter but steady, because she needs to hear it, needs to understand what this looks like without rules, without an agreement telling them how to move. And Ethan does not answer right away, which surprises her, because he always has an answer, always has a plan. But tonight he just takes a breath and lets it out slowly, like he is learning how to exist in a moment that cannot be predicted. "I do not know," he says, and there is no hesitation in it, no attempt to fix it or make it sound better, just truth. And Chloe feels something shift again, something small but significant, because for the first time since she met him, he is not offering her certainty, he is offering her honesty. She glances down briefly, her fingers brushing against her empty ring finger, the absence more noticeable now than the weight ever was, and for a second she wonders if that is what this is supposed to feel like, lighter but also more exposed, like stepping outside without something to hold on to. "That is not very reassuring," she says softly, but there is a faint trace of something else in her tone now, something that almost sounds like curiosity instead of fear, and Ethan's lips curve slightly, not into a full smile, but something close, something that carries a hint of the man she started to know in those quiet moments. "It is the truth," he replies, "and it is the only thing I can offer you right now." And Chloe nods slowly, because she understands that, maybe more than he realizes, because her entire life has been built on uncertainty, on figuring things out one step at a time, on moving forward without guarantees, and yet somehow it feels different standing here with him, because this uncertainty involves more than survival. It involves risk, emotional risk, the kind that cannot be solved with logic or contracts. She takes a small step forward without fully realizing it, closing a fraction of the distance between them, and Ethan notices, of course he notices, his attention sharpening in a way that makes her pulse quicken, because even now there is something unspoken between them, something fragile that could either grow or break depending on what they do next. "If this is going to be real," she says, choosing her words carefully, "then it cannot start with you deciding everything." And he nods immediately. No resistance, no argument, just acceptance. And that matters more than she expected, because it tells her he is listening, not just hearing her, but actually understanding what she is asking for. "Then we decide together," he says, and the simplicity of it catches her off guard, because for all the complexity of what they have been through, the answer is suddenly very simple, and yet it carries more weight than anything in that contract ever did. Chloe lets out a breath she did not realize she was holding, and for the first time since she walked out of that ballroom, the tightness in her chest eases just slightly, not gone, not resolved, but different, because now there is space for something new to exist, something they both have to choose. And as she looks at him standing there, no longer offering her a deal, but something far more uncertain, She realizes that the next step is hers to take, and that thought is both terrifying and quietly, unexpectedly hopeful. Chloe hesitates for just a fraction of a second longer, that small space between decision and action stretching wide enough to hold every fear she has ever learned to carry, because choosing uncertainty with him feels nothing like the survival choices she is used to. This is not about rent or bills or making it through another month. This is about trusting something she cannot see yet, something that could either steady her or break her in ways she cannot predict, and that thought alone makes her instinctively want to step back instead of forward. But she does not this time. Instead, she exhales slowly and takes one more step toward him, closing the distance enough that she can see the shift in his expression, the way his focus sharpens, the way he almost holds his breath like he is afraid this moment might disappear if he moves too quickly. "Then we start over," she says, the words simple but deliberate, and saying them out loud makes it real in a way that catches her off guard. Because starting over means letting go of everything that defined what they were before, the deal, the roles, the expectations, even the version of herself she hid behind just to survive it. Ethan studies her for a second, not questioning, not correcting, just absorbing it. And then he nods once, slower this time, like he understands the weight behind what she is offering. "No contracts," he says quietly, and she shakes her head, a faint, almost relieved smile touching her lips. "No contracts." She repeats, and the words feel lighter than anything she has said all night, like something is finally being set down instead of carried. There is a pause after that, not uncomfortable, not empty, just unfamiliar, because for the first time since they met, neither of them is following a script, and Chloe realizes she does not actually know what comes next, how to move, what to say, and that uncertainty almost makes her laugh, because she has spent weeks pretending to be someone who always knew exactly how to stand, how to speak, how to exist beside him, and now that it is real, she feels more like herself than she has in a long time, uncertain but honest. "So what does starting over look like?" she asks, tilting her head slightly. And Ethan's answer is immediate this time, not because he has a plan, but because he has thought about this more than he ever admitted. "It looks like I ask you something," he says, his voice softer now, more careful, "and you get to say yes or no." And something in that makes her chest tighten in a completely different way, not from pressure, but from the absence of it. Chloe nods, slowly, giving him that space, and for a moment the city seems to quiet around them, like the world is holding still just long enough to let this moment happen without interruption. And Ethan takes a small breath before speaking again, not dropping to one knee this time, not reaching for anything in his pocket, just standing there as himself. "Would you have dinner with me tomorrow?" he asks, and the simplicity of it almost surprises her, because it is so far from the grand gesture inside, so far from the spectacle, and yet it feels more significant than anything he has done tonight. Because this is not about proving something. It is about asking. Chloe feels a small smile form before she can stop it, the kind that comes from something genuine instead of practiced, and she lets the moment linger just a second longer, not to create tension, but because she wants to feel the weight of the choice, to recognize that this time it is hers completely, and as she looks at him, really looks, she realizes that for the first time since this began, she is not being pulled into something. She is stepping into it on her own terms, and that changes everything. Chloe lets the moment linger just long enough to feel it settle, to understand that this simple question carries more weight than any contract ever could, and then she nods, a small, genuine movement that feels like the beginning of something instead of the end. "Yes," she says softly, and the word is quiet but certain, and somehow it feels louder than everything that happened inside that ballroom. Ethan exhales in a way that almost sounds like relief, like he had prepared himself for another outcome but hoped for this one anyway, and for a second neither of them moves, because this is unfamiliar territory, this space where nothing is guaranteed and everything has to be chosen, step by step, without protection, without roles to hide behind. "Tomorrow," he repeats, as if anchoring it in something real, something they can both hold on to, and Chloe nods again. Because tomorrow feels manageable. Tomorrow feels like something she can step into without overthinking what comes after. A car passes behind them, headlights briefly cutting through the space between them, and when the light fades, The world seems quieter again, softer somehow, as if the city itself is giving them room to breathe. And Chloe realizes she is no longer in a rush to leave, no longer desperate to escape what this night became, because something about this moment feels unfinished in a way that does not scare her anymore. "I should go," she says after a second, not because she wants to, but because staying too long might blur the clarity she just found, might pull her back into something she is not ready to define yet. And Ethan nods, understanding without pushing, without asking for more than she has already given. "I will call you," he says, then pauses, correcting himself almost immediately. "If that is okay." And the small shift does not go unnoticed, because it is new. This way of asking instead of deciding. This way of leaving space for her choice. And Chloe feels that quiet sense of trust build just a little stronger. "It is," she replies, and there is a softness in her voice now that was not there before. Something unguarded, something real. She reaches for the taxi door again, but this time her hand does not hesitate, because leaving now does not feel like losing something. It feels like carrying something forward instead, something unfinished but possible. And as she slides into the back seat, she glances up one last time, catching his gaze still fixed on her, not intense, not demanding, just present, like he is letting her go without letting the moment disappear. The door closes with a soft click, and as the taxi pulls away from the curb, Chloe leans back against the seat, her reflection faint in the window as the city lights blur past. And for the first time in weeks, she is not thinking about what she has to pretend to be. She is thinking about what she might actually want. Her fingers brush again over her bare ring finger, and instead of feeling like something is missing, it feels like something has been cleared, like space has been made for something that actually belongs there, something not given out of obligation or strategy, but chosen freely, fully. Outside, the glow of the gala fades into the distance, becoming just another building among many, and Chloe watches it disappear without regret, because whatever that place represented is no longer where her story is being written. And as the taxi turns the corner and the city opens up ahead of her, she realizes that tomorrow is no longer just another day to survive. It is something else entirely, something uncertain, something fragile, and maybe, for the first time in a long time, something worth hoping for. The taxi ride feels longer than it should, even though the distance is only a few miles, because Chloe's mind does not slow down with the traffic. It keeps replaying everything, every word, every look, every moment where something shifted without her realizing it at the time. And now all of it feels different, like she is seeing a version of the story she was not aware she was part of. When the car finally stops in front of her building, the contrast hits her immediately: the narrow entrance, the flickering hallway light, the faint smell of old paint and worn carpet. And for a second she just sits there, hand resting on the door handle, caught between two worlds that do not quite fit together: the polished, controlled life she stepped into and the uncertain, messy one she has always known. And for the first time, neither one feels entirely right without the other. She steps out, pulling her coat tighter around herself as the night air settles in, and the quiet of the street feels grounding, familiar, something she understands without needing to think about it. And as she climbs the stairs to her apartment, each step feels like returning to herself, not the version she played, not the version she thought she had to become, but the one that exists without expectation. Inside, the space is small but hers, a single lamp casting a soft glow across her desk, where scattered sketches still lie exactly where she left them. Unfinished ideas, incomplete lines, things she had put aside while she was busy pretending to live someone else's life. And seeing them now makes something inside her shift again, because this is what she had been fighting for in the first place: not a contract, not a temporary solution, but the chance to build something real on her own terms. She sets her bag down slowly and walks over, running her fingers lightly over the paper, tracing the outlines of designs she once believed were too small to matter. And for a moment she forgets everything else: the gala, the whispers, the complicated conversation outside, because this is where her world began, where it still belongs. Her phone buzzes suddenly against the table, the sound cutting cleanly through the quiet, and Chloe glances at it, her pulse quickening just slightly as she sees his name on the screen. Not a call, Just a message, simple and direct. Tomorrow, 7. I will pick you up, but only if you want me to. And she stares at it for a second, noticing the way he phrased it, the way he left the choice entirely in her hands. No assumption, no control, just an offer. She exhales slowly, feeling the weight of that choice settle again. But this time it does not feel overwhelming. It feels clear, like something she can step into without losing herself, and she types back without overthinking it. 7 works. I will meet you there. And as she sends it, she realizes that this is different from everything before, because she is not being placed into a role. She is choosing how to show up. The room feels quieter after that, but not empty, just still, like something is waiting to begin rather than something that has ended. And Chloe moves to the window, looking out at the city lights stretching endlessly beyond her. And for the first time in a long while, she is not thinking about what could go wrong. She is thinking about what might actually work, and that thought stays with her as she turns off the lamp and lets the night settle around her, carrying with it the quiet anticipation of tomorrow. The next evening arrives slower than Chloe expects, every hour stretching just enough to make her aware of it, not with anxiety, but with a quiet anticipation she is not used to feeling. And when the time finally comes, she stands in front of her small mirror, not searching for perfection but for honesty, choosing a simple dress she already owns, something that feels like her instead of something that tries to impress. And as she smooths the fabric down, she realizes that for the first time she is not dressing to fit into his world. She is showing up as herself and letting that be enough. The restaurant she chose is nothing like the gala, no towering chandeliers, no marble floors, just warm lighting, soft music, and the low hum of conversation that feels human instead of intimidating. And when she steps inside, she notices immediately that he is already there, seated at a corner table, not surrounded by assistants or expectations, just waiting. And when he looks up and sees her, something in his expression shifts, something genuine, something unguarded that makes her pause for just a second before walking over. "Hi," she says, her voice calm but softer than she expected, and Ethan stands as she approaches, a small, almost instinctive gesture that feels different now, not formal but respectful. "Hi," he replies, and there is a hint of a smile in his voice that was not there before, something lighter, something that does not carry the weight of control. They sit, and for a moment neither of them reaches for anything else, not menus, not phones, just a brief silence that feels less like uncertainty and more like space being created for something real to settle. "Thank you for meeting me," he says after a second, and Chloe nods, because this is not something she is doing for him or for a deal. This is something she chose. "Thank you for asking," she replies, and the simplicity of that exchange feels more meaningful than anything they have said in a room full of people. The waiter approaches, and they order without much thought. But as the conversation begins, Chloe notices something immediately different, the way Ethan listens, not strategically, not waiting for the right moment to respond, but actually present, actually paying attention. And when he speaks, it is not about business or expectations. It is about things she never expected him to share, small details about his childhood, the way he built his company, the mistakes he made along the way, and she finds herself doing the same, talking about her designs, her struggles, the nights she almost gave up but did not. And somewhere between those exchanges, something shifts again, something quieter this time but deeper, because this is not about proving anything. This is about understanding. At one point, Chloe catches herself smiling without realizing it. And when she looks up, she notices Ethan watching her, not intensely, not in a way that feels overwhelming, but like he is memorizing something simple, something real. And she feels that familiar flutter again, but this time it does not scare her. It feels steady, like something she can trust if she chooses to. The food arrives, and they continue talking, the conversation flowing in a way that makes time feel different, less structured, less controlled. And when there is a pause, it does not feel awkward. It feels comfortable, like neither of them is trying to fill space with something unnecessary. Later, as the evening begins to wind down, Chloe leans back slightly, studying him in a way she never allowed herself to before. And she realizes that this version of him, the one sitting across from her now, is not the man who offered her a contract. He is someone else entirely, someone who chose to step out of control and into something uncertain, just like she did, and that realization settles quietly in her chest, not as a conclusion, but as a possibility that is only just beginning to take shape. The night stretches a little longer than either of them expected, not because they're trying to hold on to it, but because neither of them feels the need to end it too quickly. And when they finally step outside the restaurant, the air is cooler, calmer, the city quieter in that way it only gets late at night, when everything feels possible and unresolved at the same time. Chloe wraps her coat around herself as they walk side by side down the sidewalk, not touching, not rushing, just moving at the same pace without needing to coordinate it. And she notices how natural it feels, how different it is from before when every step had to match a role, every gesture had to fit an image. This was nice, she says after a moment. And the simplicity of it makes her smile slightly, because it feels honest, uncomplicated, and Ethan glances at her with that same softened expression he has carried all evening. It was. He agrees, and there is no attempt to turn it into something more, no pressure hidden behind the words, just acknowledgement of what it was. They stop near the corner where their paths separate, the quiet hum of the city settling around them. And for a second neither of them speaks, not because there is nothing to say, but because this moment feels like something that should not be rushed, something that deserves to exist exactly as it is without being defined too quickly. Chloe looks at him, really looks again, and she realizes how much has changed in such a short time, not just in him, but in herself, the way she no longer feels like she has to protect herself from him, but still holds on to the awareness that this is fragile, that whatever they are building now is still new, still untested. I meant what I said, Ethan says quietly, breaking the silence, his voice steady but softer than before, about wanting something real, and Chloe nods, because she believes him now in a way she could not before, not because of a grand gesture, but because of everything that came after it, the way he listened, the way he adjusted, the way he gave her space to choose. I know, she replies, her voice calm, and there is a small pause before she adds, and I am still figuring out what that looks like for me. And he nods immediately, not questioning, not pushing, just accepting. And that acceptance matters more than she expected, because it means she does not have to have all the answers right now. She just has to be honest about where she is. Ethan takes a small step closer, not closing the distance completely, but enough to shift the moment into something more intentional. And for a second Chloe wonders if he is going to reach for her hand, but he does not. He just stands there, giving her the space to decide what comes next, and that restraint, that patience, feels more meaningful than any gesture he could have made. Can I see you again? He asks, not assuming, not planning ahead, just asking, and Chloe feels that same quiet warmth rise in her chest, because this is how it should have started, simple, mutual, chosen. She smiles slightly, not because she has all the answers, but because she knows enough to take the next step. Yes, she says, and this time it feels different from the first yes, less uncertain, more grounded, like something she is stepping into with awareness instead of being pulled into without it. The moment lingers just a little longer after that, neither of them in a hurry to break it, and then Chloe takes a step back, not away from him, but toward her own direction, her own space. And Ethan mirrors it in his own way, both of them holding onto the understanding that whatever this becomes, it will only work if they meet each other in the middle, not halfway into someone else's world, but somewhere entirely new. As she turns to leave, Chloe glances back once more, catching his gaze still on her, steady and real, and for the first time she does not feel the need to question it. She simply lets it be, and as she walks away, the night no longer feels like an ending. It feels like something quietly unfolding, something that is not defined by a single moment, but by all the ones that are still to come. Days turn into something softer than Chloe expected, not rushed, not overwhelming, but steady in a way that feels unfamiliar at first, like learning a rhythm she was never taught, but somehow understands. And each time she sees Ethan again, it becomes a little easier to recognize what is real and what is not, because there are no more performances, no more roles to hide behind, just moments that either connect or fall apart on their own. And somehow, they keep choosing connection. It happens in small ways at first. The way he remembers details she mentioned once and brings them up without making it feel like a strategy. The way she stops second-guessing every word she says, and just lets herself be heard. The way silence between them becomes something comfortable instead of something that needs to be filled, and those moments begin to build into something stronger. Something neither of them rushes to define, but both of them quietly protect. One afternoon, weeks later, Chloe stands in a bright studio space she never thought she would have. Her designs spread across tables, sunlight pouring through tall windows, and for a moment she just takes it in, the reality of it, because this was always the goal, not a contract, not a temporary escape, but something she built, something she earned. And as she runs her hand over the fabric of a finished piece, she hears the door open behind her, a familiar presence stepping into the room without disrupting it. "This is yours," Ethan says quietly, not as a claim, but as recognition, and Chloe turns to look at him, a small smile forming because he understands now, understands that this is not something he gave her. It is something she created, and the respect in that changes everything. "It is," she replies, her voice steady. And there is pride there, but also something softer, something that connects this moment to all the ones that came before it. Ethan steps closer, not too close, just enough to stand beside her instead of in front of her, and together they look at what she has built, not as a transaction, not as a favor, but as something real that exists independently of both of them. And that independence is what makes what they share feel stronger instead of fragile. "I was wrong about a lot of things," he says after a moment, his tone calm but honest, "especially about thinking I could control how something like this works." And Chloe lets out a quiet breath, because she has seen that change in him, not just in what he says, but in how he acts, how he listens, how he chooses to show up without taking over, and that matters more than any apology. "You are not the only one," she admits, glancing at him briefly. "I thought I had to protect myself from everything, including something that might actually be good." And there is a small pause after that, not uncomfortable, just reflective, because they both understand how close they came to missing this entirely. Ethan reaches into his pocket then, and Chloe notices the movement immediately, her breath catching just slightly, not out of fear this time, but awareness, because she knows what that gesture used to mean, what it almost meant before everything changed, and he notices her reaction. Of course he does, and instead of moving forward, he stops, his hand still in his pocket as he looks at her, giving her the space to decide what this moment becomes. Chloe meets his gaze, steady now, grounded in everything they have built since that night, and she takes a small step closer, closing the distance on her own terms, not because she is being asked to, but because she wants to, and in that moment, she realizes something simple but undeniable, that what started as something fake did not become real because of a grand gesture. It became real because they chose it, over and over again, in ways that were quiet, honest, and entirely theirs.